It closed one chapter of the party and opens another one. This is once-in-a-decade leadership change, and nearly half of the new Central Committee members are new faces. The outgoing General Secretary sum up the past decade with confidence.
China has seen continuous economic growth, improvement in democracy, social stability, and we have worked hard to bring the people more benefits than ever before.
In 10 years, China has become the second largest economy, and its presence felt around the world. The Chinese Communist Party has been confident but not complacent. The new leaders of the CPC are clear-headed about the future challenges.
There are many pressing problems within the party that need to be resolved, particularly corruption, being divorced from the people, and bureaucracy.
The outgoing General Secretary also laid out a vision for his successor.
We should double our GDP by 2020 and per capita income for both urban and rural residents.
Well, Elaine, this is a very competitive process for the seven-man to make its way into the Standing Committee. Especially for Xi. Xi Jinping is a tested politician. He's considered by many to be open, straightforward, and down to earth. He has been serving in the remote mountainous areas as well as the developed coastal cities, both in the military and the civilians.
It all began really in 1921. The party meets for the first time in Shanghai. Mao Zedong attends the meeting as a representative from Hunan. 3 years later, it joins with the Chinese Nationalist Party to form what is now called the first cooperation between the two parties. Let's move ahead just a bit. We'll head to 1935 now. The Red Army, led by the Communist Party, completes the well-known Long March to establish their base in Yan'an, in northern China's Shanxi province. Now, during the march, Mao becomes the party leader. Over the next 20 years, China sees several periods of violence, including the war against Japanese invaders and a civil war between the communists and the nationalists. The conflict will end in 1949. That's when the communists declare victory. They establish the People's Republic of China. Now, to 1958, China sees the Great Leap Forward, a social political movement. It failed. It caused food shortages and famine in China. Then we move ahead again to 1966 to 1976. This is the Cultural Revolution. It led to a massive purge of senior officials, caused chaos really across the country. Millions of people were persecuted in widespread violence. Historical relics and artifacts were destroyed. Cultural and religious sites were also ransacked. Another key milestone. U.S. President Richard Nixon visits China in 1972. His intent to normalize relations. He didn't know it at the time, but Mao Zedong was dying. He would die 4 years later. Now, we move ahead again. Deng Xiaoping rises to power, and China undergoes a series of economic reforms. In the late 1980s, China opens to foreign investment and to a market economy. Following some domestic turmoil in 1989, Jiang Zemin takes over soon after the Shanghai stock market will open. Then, in 1987, China regains control of Hong Kong from British rule. And then in 2000, the U.S. and China, they establish normal trade relations, and soon after, China enters the World Trade Organization. In 2002, a new Politburo is formed. It's led by General Secretary Hu Jintao and Premier Wen Jiabao. Then, we jump ahead to 2012. Xi Jinping becomes the new party leader.
China revealed its new leadership yesterday. The new party leader, Xi Jinping, delivered a keynote speech in front of the global media. In his speech, Xi looked back at the party's achievements in leading the Chinese people to change their lives, and he also promised to lead the party to fight for the revival of China's national civilization.
Since its founding, the Communist Party of China has made great sacrifices and forged ahead against all odds. It has rallied and led the Chinese people in transforming the poor and backward old China into an increasingly prosperous and powerful new China, thus opening a completely new horizon for the great renewal of the Chinese nation. Our responsibility now is to rally and lead the entire party and the people of all ethnic groups in China in taking over the relay baton passed on to us by history, and in making continued efforts to achieve the great renewal of the Chinese nation. Make the Chinese nation stand rock firm in the family of nations, and make even greater contribution to mankind.
The key concept here is scientific outlook on development coined by former party chief Hu Jintao. What it really means is a set of theories and policy that aim to make the wealth distribution more equal and make economic development more sustainable. Well, we've got to understand that there is a political culture in China that loves to invent new political slogans. If you remember, they hope that politicians hope that somehow through mass media, these slogans can be picked up by the public, and so their political legacy can be long remembered when they leave office. This goes all the way back to the Mao era, if you remember the Mao Zedong thought, and then later it was the Deng Xiaoping theory that championed free market economy. That was enshrined, by the way, in the 14th Party Congress, and later there's something called Three Represents. Basically, it's a phrase coined by former party chief Jiang Zemin that opened our party rank to non-party members, such as college students, entrepreneurs, and that was enshrined in the party congress 2 decades ago. And so this congress is about Hu Jintao and his scientific outlook. Other amendments include tougher measures to crack down on corruption, meritocracy-based promotional system, as well as balancing the economic growth with, of course, protecting the environment.
So that is a long list, but for those who may not understand, it's meant to take place over a long period of time. So we shouldn't expect anything so soon.
Correct, right. Well, we have to bear in mind that any decision-making process in China, that comes incrementally. We don't come to see a great leap forward any longer. People have been talking about the fact that there's been a downsize of the Politburo Standing Committee from 9 to 7, and why is that happening now? Well, there has been a speculation that says basically the top leadership realized over the years that they want the decision-making process to be more decisive and to be more efficient. That's why they downsized the Politburo, and also that could have come in wake of a number of high-profile corruption scandals, especially the case with Bo Xilai, so that the party elders feel that they should curb on this factional competition for power, and so that's why we see a downsizing the Politburo from 7 to 9. And we should also bear in mind that the size is not always fixed. Back in the 80s, it was 5, sometimes 6, and throughout the 90s, sometimes it was 7. Now it's back to 7 again.
To the outside world, China's political structure may be a bit confusing. There are several parties in China, but the Chinese Communist Party, or the CPC, is the ruling party. Inside the CPC, there are a lot of different elements at play. Here's a snapshot of the party that's ruled China since 1949.
Let's start with the National Party Congress. It convenes every 5 years. It's made up of nearly 3,000 delegates, each of them elected from China's provinces and regions and various government departments. Its main function is to elect a central committee of about 200 full members and about 170 alternate members. That central committee meets annually and is in charge of electing a new Politburo and its standing committee. That small group is the highest body of the CPC. It meets regularly and discusses all of the key issues in the country. The standing committee also fills important posts, like the party's general secretary. While the National Party Congress meets every 5 years to elect new party leaders, the National People's Congress meets every year. The body is considered China's parliament, which is in charge of approving the nominations of the premier and the ministers. Here, all potential legislation is open for consideration and approval. In addition, the People's Congress elects the country's president, vice president, and its own chairman. There are also party and NPC congresses in different provinces and regions, which meet to discuss matters of local importance. Because there are several parties in China, the CPC forms alliances with the other smaller parties. This forms the CPP-CC, the China People's Political Consultative Conference. It also meets every year.
Now, one of the biggest concerns voiced by President Hu Jintao is corruption. There's a separate party organization with the sole purpose of tackling that problem. The Discipline Inspection Commission serves as a sort of watchdog on a national level, working to root out corruption or bad management.
Let's touch on corruption quickly. You just mentioned that because it was something that was said at the beginning of the Congress by Hu Jintao, and it was something that was also mentioned at the end by Xi Jinping.
Right. I think this is a issue that the Communist Party really have to tackle. If you listen to the speech made by Xi Jinping, the new party boss, yesterday, he spoke with a sense of urgency. He said that we show the responsibility of the people, that we've got to tackle this issue because it's so endemic, it's so entrenched. But people would also raises the question that how they're going to do this. Are they going to walk the talk?